Alright, hello, my name is Dr. Drew Hall. I'm going to talk about one of the foundational principles, probably the most important foundational principle of the Blair chiropractic analysis. Dr. Blair came up with this idea called osseous asymmetry. And the reason he came up with this foundational principle was he wasn't satisfied with the results that he was getting with traditional HIO analysis. And HIO analysis is based on the premise that our bone structure is built symmetrically. So when they're comparing structures above and below, they're looking for orthogonal or parallel lines in the wedge system. And what Dr. Blair found was a certain percentage of cases wouldn't clear out. So he came up with this idea that after study, and actually BJ and subluxation specific, adjustment specific actually talked about this. He called it the problem case. He said there's a certain percentage of people who have malformation in their bone structure that when using a symmetrical system of analysis on x-ray, they're going to come up with one listing or direction for misalignment when in fact that isn't the true direction for them because they aren't built symmetrically. So Dr. Blair actually broke down all these asymmetries in the upper cervical area down into different categories. And basically one of them that he looked at was how the foramen magnum, which you know is the hole in the bottom of the skull, is situated relative to the sagittal line. If you were assuming perfect symmetry, you would expect the foramen magnum to be, if you stuck a sagittal line down through the person, to be split perfectly in half, right and left. Yes? But he found, I don't have the exact percentages in front of me, but I believe it was 72% of the foramen magnum in the specimens that he analyzed was off-center to the right or the left compared to the sagittal line, and that is not due to the misalignment. That's actually how the bone structure is built. So why would that be a problem? Most of you in school have been taught static and motion palpation. So we'll start with static palpation. Imagine a foramen magnum off-center to the right side 3/8 of an inch. Again, just how their bone structure is built. And if it's off-center 3/8 of an inch to the right side and the atlas fits on there, that atlas is going to fit over here on the right side also, right? So what do you think is going to happen when you have an off-center foramen magnum to the right and you palpate that person? They're going to feel like they have a right atlas when that may just be the way their bone structure is built. And I'm going to give you a take-home story just to let you realize that this isn't just some idea that Dr. Blair came up with while after a 12-pack. This is actually real-life data. When I was in Cleveland Chiropractic College, there was a upperclassman who was really fired up about chiropractic philosophy. I mean, listened to Gentempo's On Purpose tape. He actually ran the philosophy club. He was, I believe, the president of the school one time too, but really fired up. Good guy. Well, he had a girlfriend at the time, and he was adjusting her atlas from right to left. And she had asthma and migraine headaches, and as he was adjusting her, she was getting worse and worse. And if you're really fired up about chiropractic philosophy and then you start delivering it technique-wise and the result doesn't add up to what your belief system is, that becomes a little troubling. So we got into discussion and he spilled the beans about this particular case, and I got telling him about asymmetry, and eventually I convinced him to take this gal to Dr. Topping down here in Southern California. And she had the exact same situation that I was just describing. She had a foramen magnum. In the Blair work, we take a picture of the bottom of the head called the base posterior. But she had a foramen magnum that was way off-center to the right side, and so when that atlas was articulating or fitting to the base of the skull, she was feeling like she was a right atlas. When the Blair views were taken, and in the Blair work we look at how the joints fit, because where the joints fit together they're perfect mirror images of one another, and if that vertebra shifted out of position and we image the outer joint margin, we can see whether that atlas is even, has shifted off this way, we can actually measure how much, or shift under this way depending on the case. Well, when those pictures were taken on this gal with that off-center foramen magnum to the right, they found that her atlas on the joints was actually misaligned to the left side. Now, that misalignment to the left side structurally was smaller than the osseous malformation or asymmetry to the right, so she still palpated to the right. And to make a really long story short, Dr. Topping adjusted her an ASL atlas, and she responded and did better and better and better. And that kind of illustrates the point of what Dr. B.J. Palmer said. He said, chiropractic is specific or is nothing, but there's something that's below that, and the something that's below that is you have to have the right information. BJ said you can give the best adjustment in the wrong direction and get no results. Or you can make a mediocre adjustment with the right analysis of the right direction and get results. So your analysis in determining how someone is out of position is absolutely imperative. And I think that's one of the strengths of the Blair work, because it's the only technique out there that actually has as its underlying premise that our bone structure is not built symmetrically. Here's something I see in practice all the time. We take the APOM, and you can see the transverse process of the right atlas and the left atlas. And very commonly, you will see the transverse process much, much bigger on one side compared to the other. Again, that's just how they're built. Transverse process longer on one side versus the other. What do you think is going to happen if you're palpating transverse to right or left laterality of atlas? What do you think is going to happen? You're going to find that that more prominent or bigger transverse process is the side of laterality, when it just may be how that person is built. Here's another one Dr. Blair talked about. He called it the turned foramen magnum. The posterior apex of the foramen magnum, if you were to draw a line through that, and the anterior apex, you'd expect those to line up and you'd expect them to be straight on, right? Well, he found, I believe this one, don't quote me, is 69% of cases have a turned foramen magnum. So that hole in the bottom of the head, the way it's situated, is turned either this way or this way. Again, that's bone structure. It has nothing to do with an osseous misalignment, right? That's just how they're built. So, if you have someone with the turned foramen magnum, look at what happens to the spinous process. It's fitting there, and you're going to get a spinous that's kicked to the right or the left, and that's just innate adaptation. Innate had an asymmetry in there. It had to deal with that asymmetry by building an adaptation down below. If you want to know more about osseous asymmetry, I implore you to take a Blair seminar. It's gone over in great detail all the adaptations of the different malformations and asymmetries that exist, and so that'll encapsulate this lesson. I covered maybe a 10th to a 15th of the asymmetries that Dr. Blair talked about, but I did want to, in this first foundational principle of Blair upper cervical, talk about asymmetry and how asymmetry can affect your analysis, because I think all of us want to help our patients to the best ability possible, and if you don't have the right analysis, you aren't going to have the right correction, and you're not going to get the results you're looking for. Till next time.